Man saves deer from python. What the other 5 did next was simply incredible. The piercing distress calls echoed across the golden grasslands of Kenya's Maasai Mara, carrying with them a desperation that wildlife ranger James Kimutai had rarely encountered in his 12 years, protecting East Africa's most precious ecosystem. The sounds weren't the typical alarm calls of grazing herbivores warning of approaching predators, but something far more urgent. A cry for help that seemed to transcend the usual patterns of savanna communication. James immediately altered his patrol route toward the source of the commotion, his experienced hands gripping the steering wheel as his mind raced through possibilities. What he would discover in a small clearing surrounded by fever trees would challenge everything he understood about interspecies behavior and force him to make a decision that would define not only his career, but reshape scientific understanding of wildlife cognition. In the dappled shade of the acacia grove, an extraordinary scene was unfolding. A massive African rock python, easily 15 feet in length, had wrapped its powerful coils around a young male impala, its muscular body constricting around the antelope's chest and neck with deadly precision. The impala's eyes bulged with terror and oxygen deprivation as the snake's grip tightened methodically, following millions of years of evolutionary programming. But what made this encounter truly remarkable wasn't the predation itself. Pythons occasionally took antelopes of this size. It was the response of the impala's herd. Instead of fleeing to safety as their instincts demanded, 5 other impalas had remained, forming a protective semicircle around their trapped companion. The lead buck, distinguished by his impressive horns and battle-scarred flanks, was frantically pawing at the python's coils, his sharp hooves striking the snake's body while being careful not to injure his herdmate. 2 young does flanked him, their usual timidity replaced by an aggressive determination that defied everything James knew about impala behavior. They took turns charging at the python's exposed sections, their small hooves creating minor impacts that seemed to frustrate the predator without causing serious harm. Meanwhile, an older female and a juvenile male maintained positions on either side, creating what appeared to be a coordinated defense formation. James's training was explicit and non-negotiable: never interfere with natural predator-prey interactions, regardless of how dramatic or emotionally compelling they might appear. The ecosystem's balance depended on allowing nature to follow its course, even when that course seemed harsh to human observers. Park protocols existed for good reasons, developed over decades of conservation experience and ecological research. However, this situation presented complexities that transcended standard wildlife management guidelines. Pythons rarely targeted adult impalas in open grassland, typically preferring smaller prey or hunting near water sources where larger animals were more vulnerable. This encounter appeared to be an unusual accident. Perhaps the impala had stumbled into the python's ambush, meant for smaller prey. Or the snake had overestimated its ability to handle such a large, agile target. More significantly, James recognized this particular herd. They were regular inhabitants of Sector G4, a group he'd observed for over 3 years during his patrols. The trapped impala was Jengo, named by researchers for his distinctive white marking that resembled a traditional Maasai shield pattern on his flank. Jengo wasn't just any herd member, he was the group's primary scout, the individual whose vigilance and quick responses had saved the herd from predator attacks on multiple occasions. The ranger reached for his radio, his voice steady, despite the internal conflict raging in his mind. "Base station, this is Ranger Kimutai, Sector G4. I have a python predation event involving the resident impala herd. The group is displaying unusual protective behavior, requesting guidance on observation protocols." The response crackled through the static. "Copy, Ranger Kimutai. Maintain observation distance. Document behavior but do not intervene." Natural selection processes must proceed without human interference. James watched as the lead buck intensified his efforts, his powerful legs driving his hooves against the python's muscular coils. The snake, committed to its prey but now harassed by multiple attackers, began to show signs of stress. Its coils loosened slightly as it attempted to position itself to strike at the attacking impalas, creating momentary opportunities that the herd seemed to recognize instinctively. The does coordinated their charges with remarkable precision, one distracting the python's head while the other targeted its midsection. The older female had positioned herself to block potential escape routes, while the juvenile male served as a lookout for other predators that might be attracted to the commotion. Their behavior suggested a level of strategic thinking and cooperative problem-solving that challenged fundamental assumptions about impala intelligence and social structure. Django's struggles were visibly weakening as the python's coils constricted his breathing. His eyes, usually bright and alert, were beginning to glaze as oxygen deprivation took its toll. James realized that despite the herd's courageous efforts, they lacked the physical capability to overcome the python's superior strength and evolutionary advantages. If this incredible display of animal cooperation and loyalty is captivating you as much as it is us, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary wildlife encounters. Your support helps us bring you these amazing stories from the African wilderness that showcase the remarkable intelligence and emotional depth of the animals we share this planet with. In that pivotal moment, James made a decision that would haunt and inspire him for years to come. "I can't stand here and watch this," he whispered, switching off his radio to avoid receiving direct orders to maintain non-interference. He retrieved his snake hook and heavy protective gloves from the emergency kit, tools designed for relocating dangerous reptiles from tourist areas, and approached the chaotic scene with calculated caution. The risk was extraordinary. He was inserting himself into a dynamic situation involving a powerful constrictor and 5 agitated wild antelopes, any of whom could potentially injure him with their sharp hooves or horns if they perceived him as an additional threat. African rock pythons, while non-venomous, possessed crushing strength capable of breaking human bones, and their defensive strikes could cause severe lacerations. However, something in the lead buck's behavior provided James with hope. As he approached, the large male impala's attention shifted briefly to the human, but instead of alarm or aggression, the animal's expression seemed to convey desperate recognition. The buck had seen James's vehicle during routine patrols over the years, a familiar presence associated with protection rather than threat. "Easy, friends," James said in the low, calm voice he'd developed through years of working with wildlife. "I'm here to help Django." Though he knew the impalas couldn't understand his words, his tone and deliberate movements seemed to communicate his peaceful intentions. Moving with practiced precision, James approached from the python's tail section, opposite to where the lead buck was working. If this rescue attempt was going to succeed, it would require coordination between human intelligence and the impala's natural agility and determination. The snake, now under attack from multiple directions, made a critical error in judgment. Sensing the new threat from behind, it loosened its coils slightly to reposition itself, attempting to face the approaching human while maintaining its grip on Django. That momentary relaxation was exactly what the situation needed. James slipped his snake hook under one of the python's coils, applying steady upward pressure while the lead buck seemed to intuitively understand the strategy. The magnificent impala pushed his snout into the small gap created by the hook, using his considerable strength to force the coil open further. The coordination between species was remarkable, 2 very different forms of intelligence working toward a common goal. The 2 does intensified their harassment of the python's head section, preventing it from striking at either James or the lead buck while they worked to free Django. Their timing was impeccable. suggesting communication and strategic thinking that contradicted established scientific understanding of impala cognitive capabilities. What happened next would be replayed countless times in slow motion by researchers studying the footage from James's dashboard camera. As the ranger maintained leverage with his hook and the lead buck forced open the coils around Django's chest, the python made a desperate attempt to strike at James. The movement caused its grip to loosen further, just enough for Django to begin his own struggle for freedom. With renewed strength born of hope, the trapped impala twisted his body, his powerful haunches driving against the loosened coils. The lead buck adjusted his position instantly, using his horns to create additional space around Django's neck area. James maintained pressure with the snake hook while reaching with his free hand to grab another section of the python's body. For several surreal moments, human and impalas worked in perfect synchronization despite being species separated by millions of years of evolution. Their movements were coordinated not by language or prior planning, but by shared purpose and intuitive understanding of each other's capabilities and limitations. The python, realizing its advantage was disappearing, made one final attempt to maintain its grip on Django, while simultaneously trying to escape the multiple attackers. The powerful snake writhed violently, its muscular body creating dangerous whip-like movements that could have seriously injured any of its opponents. James felt the enormous strength in the python's muscles as he maintained his grip, but the combined efforts of all the rescuers were proving effective. The lead buck had managed to create enough space around Django's neck for the trapped impala to breathe more freely, while the does continued their coordinated harassment of the snake's head section. With a final coordinated effort that seemed almost choreographed, they succeeded in creating enough space for Django to slip free from the python's coils. The moment he escaped, the dynamic of the entire situation changed instantly. The lead buck's focus shifted from rescue to ensuring the python could never threaten his herd again, his hooves striking at the snake with renewed aggression. James recognized the immediate danger and began a careful retreat toward his vehicle. The alliance of necessity was ending, and he needed to remove himself from what was about to become a very different kind of confrontation. The python, now free of its intended prey but facing multiple attackers, made the decision to retreat, slithering rapidly toward the thicker brush where the impalas couldn't follow effectively. Reaching his jeep, James climbed inside with his heart pounding against his ribs as the full magnitude of what had just occurred hit him. He had violated the park's most fundamental protocol by interfering in a predator-prey interaction. He had placed himself at extraordinary risk by positioning himself between a python and 5 wild antelopes. By any rational assessment, the situation should have ended with serious injury or death for multiple participants. Instead, he was watching through his windshield as Django, though shaken and bearing minor injuries from the python's coils, rejoined his herd. The 5 other impalas surrounded him, their relief evident in their gentle nuzzling and protective positioning. The lead buck maintained a vigilant watch on the area where the python had disappeared, ensuring the threat was truly gone. Taking his radio with trembling hands, James knew he had to report the incident before rumors spread among other rangers or researchers who might have witnessed the extraordinary event from a distance. The footage from his dashboard camera would provide irrefutable evidence of what had transpired, but it would also document his clear violation of park protocols. The following weeks brought unprecedented scrutiny to the usually routine operations of the Maasai Mara research station. Director Wanjiku convened emergency meetings with senior staff, wildlife behaviorists, and conservation officials to review the dashboard camera footage. The video evidence was extraordinary. Clear documentation of apparent interspecies cooperation and problem-solving behavior that challenged fundamental assumptions about wildlife cognition. The scientific implications are staggering, insisted Dr. Mwangi during one heated discussion. This footage shows coordinated behavior and apparent recognition between species that we've never documented in wild populations. It suggests cognitive capabilities and social structures that contradict established research on impala intelligence and behavior patterns. However, James's violation of non-interference protocols couldn't be ignored, regardless of the remarkable outcomes. After a formal investigation, he received an official reprimand and temporary suspension, though many staff members privately supported his decision. The incident sparked intense debate within the conservation community about the rigidity of non-intervention policies when extraordinary circumstances arose. When James returned from suspension, he was reassigned to patrol the sector containing the G4 herd's territory. The official explanation emphasized his familiarity with the group and the value of continued observation for research purposes. Unofficially, everyone understood that the impala's unusual comfort with his presence made him the ideal person to document their ongoing behavior. What unfolded during the subsequent months challenged every assumption about impala cognition and social behavior. Django had recovered completely from his encounter with the python, the experience leaving him with minor scars but no lasting physical limitations. More remarkably, the entire herd demonstrated unprecedented behavior whenever James's vehicle appeared in their territory. Unlike their typical response to approaching vehicles, alert wariness followed by gradual relaxation, the G4 herd showed what researchers reluctantly termed recognition behavior. The lead buck, in particular, would often approach James's stationary vehicle directly, maintaining eye contact before settling nearby with the rest of the herd following his lead. The most extraordinary incident occurred approximately 6 weeks after the python encounter. James was conducting routine behavioral observations when he noticed Django favoring one leg, his gait suggesting possible injury from a recent fall or encounter with thorns. Following standard protocol, he documented the observation and reported it to the research station's veterinary consultant, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, but took no direct action. The next morning, James arrived at his usual observation point to discover something that defied all existing scientific literature on impala behavior. Just 20 meters from where he typically parked his vehicle, the lead buck was waiting with what appeared to be deliberate intention. Beside the magnificent impala lay a freshly killed dik-dik, small antelope prey that impalas never hunted and rarely scavenged. As James watched in amazement, the lead buck made direct eye contact, then deliberately moved away from the carcass while maintaining his gaze on the vehicle. The behavior was unmistakable in its apparent intentionality. The impala was presenting an offering, a gesture that seemed to communicate gratitude and request for assistance. "He's trying to reciprocate," Dr. Mitchell whispered when she arrived 2 hours later with emergency veterinary supplies. "Indeed, this appears to be some form of gift-giving behavior, possibly acknowledging your previous assistance and requesting help for Django's current injury." After extensive consultation with Director Wanjiku and wildlife behaviorists in Nairobi, an unprecedented decision was made. Using a remote dart system operated from James's vehicle, they administered antibiotics to treat Django's infected wound, while the rest of the herd maintained their protective formation nearby. The lead buck watched the entire procedure with calm attention, his behavior suggesting understanding rather than alarm. As weeks turned to months, the G4 herd's unique relationship with James became both a closely guarded research opportunity and a source of international scientific interest. Limited footage was shared with primatologists, cognitive ethologists, and ungulate behavior specialists worldwide, generating intense debate about the implications for understanding animal intelligence and social behavior. The relationship continued to evolve in ways that challenged established scientific paradigms. The herd began approaching James's vehicle more closely than any wild impala group had ever been documented doing with human observers. They seemed to recognize the difference between his specific vehicle and other research or tourist vehicles, responding with their usual wariness to unfamiliar humans while showing remarkable tolerance for James's presence. 6 months after the python incident, the International Journal of Animal Behavior published a groundbreaking paper titled Observed Reciprocal Altruism and Interspecies Recognition in Wild Impala Following Human Intervention Event. The publication sparked heated academic debate about anthropomorphism, cognitive capabilities in ungulates, and the ethics of wildlife intervention. For James Kimutai, the scientific controversy was secondary to the daily reality of his transformed relationship with the animals he had dedicated his life to protecting. He maintained strict adherence to safety protocols and never left his vehicle in the herd's presence. But the connection formed during that desperate moment had fundamentally altered his understanding of the creatures he observed. The bond seemed to extend beyond mere familiarity or habituation. On multiple occasions, the lead buck demonstrated what appeared to be protective behavior toward James's vehicle. When other predators were detected in the area, the herd would position themselves between potential threats and James's location, as if extending their protective instincts to include their human observer. One particularly remarkable incident occurred during the dry season when a leopard was stalking near James's observation post. The lead buck approached the vehicle directly and executed a series of alarm calls while facing the direction of the hidden predator. His behavior effectively warned James of the danger while alerting the rest of the herd to the threat, a level of interspecies communication that had never been documented in scientific literature. On the first anniversary of the python rescue, James was conducting his routine observations when the entire G4 herd approached his vehicle in a coordinated group movement. Django, now fully recovered and bearing only faint scars from his ordeal, walked directly to the passenger side of the Jeep and stood quietly for several minutes, his dark eyes meeting James's through the window. The lead buck positioned himself nearby, his majestic horns glinting in the morning sunlight as he gazed steadily at the human who had once crossed species boundaries to become an ally rather than a mere observer. The three does and young male formed a protective semicircle, their positioning creating an unmistakable sense of ceremony around the moment. "I see you too, my friends," James said quietly, though he knew the impalas couldn't understand his words. Thank you for teaching us that intelligence and compassion aren't limited to humans." The incident ultimately transformed wildlife research protocols throughout Kenya's protected areas, establishing new guidelines for documenting and studying complex behaviors previously dismissed as anthropomorphic interpretation. While strict non-intervention policies remained in place, a deeper appreciation emerged for the cognitive capabilities and emotional complexity of the species under protection. The G4 herd continued to thrive in their territory, their population growing as Django and the other members successfully raised new generations. Their territory expanded to include some of the richest grazing areas in the northern Mara, and their survival strategies became subjects of intensive study by researchers worldwide. While safari vehicles came and went, photographing the beautiful impalas from respectful distances, only one particular Green Ranger Jeep was ever allowed within the herd's inner comfort zone. This unique privilege was granted to a human who had once made the extraordinary choice to reach across species boundaries to save a life, and in doing so had revealed something profound about the intelligence, loyalty, and emotional depth of the creatures with whom we share this remarkable planet. The story of James and the G4 herd became a testament to the incredible bonds that can form between humans and wildlife, when mutual respect and understanding transcend the traditional boundaries between species. It stands as powerful evidence that intelligence, compassion, and loyalty are not uniquely human traits, but rather part of a broader spectrum of consciousness that connects all life on Earth.